This is the Oracle Speaks. I am the Village Elliot. I'm talking about the past, present, and future of the Cleveland Browns. But I'm really going to talk about the upcoming game between Cleveland and the Jets, the wonderful Jets. The wonderful New York Jets on Thursday night in Cleveland. I really hate the New York Jets. I really do. And I'm going to tell you why. In fact, I'm going to show you why. Let's talk about, how about the butt fumble? Is that a good reason to hate the Jets? I think it is. Let's talk about that. Let's start with that. I'm going to start the show with the butt fumble. Okay. Let me share the screen here in just a minute. Okay. Present. Share screen. And here it is. Okay. This is the famous play, the butt fumble, where Mark Sanchez runs into the cast iron butt of one of the offensive linemen, falls down, fumbles, and then New England picks up the ball, runs with it, scores a touchdown. It was a series of 3 quick scores by New England, completely destroys the New York Jets. That's what the New York Jets are about, man. I'm telling you, this is what they're about. They think they're the world's greatest team in pro football history every year, and they just really are not. It's really ridiculous. And okay, so we're back. It used to be that the New York Jets were really the cool team. When I was a kid, man, they had Joe Namath. The greatest game that I ever saw, still to this day, is Super Bowl III, where the New York Jets upset the Baltimore Colts. That really were the greatest team in NFL history up to that time. They had the greatest defense, and a lot of people think that, the New York Jets were lucky, but they were not. What had happened was that the AFL, the American Football League, had actually gotten tactically superior to the NFL, in my judgment at least, and they were able to dominate the Baltimore Colts, even though the Baltimore Colts had bigger, stronger, faster, better players. The Jets were tactically superior and dominated that Baltimore Colts team. And if you didn't believe that, and by the way, they were 18-point favorites. The Minnesota Vikings did the exact same thing the next year. They were 14-point favorites, and they got absolutely pummeled by the Kansas City Chiefs the following year. Now, it's not a coincidence if you have an 18-point favorite and a 14-point favorite, and they both get absolutely pummeled one after the other in the biggest game in pro football. That's not a coincidence. So anyway, kudos to the 1969 New York Jets, but these modern New York Jets teams are just sickening. They're as bad in many respects as our 2017 Cleveland Browns teams. And you'll remember that the Cleveland Browns have been worshiping quarterbacks in the worst way. Every year, our Browns used to anoint somebody as the franchise quarterback. In 2017, it was Deshaun Kaiser, who they drafted in the second round. He was only 21 years old and had only 2 years of real quarterbacking at Notre Dame. And they thought, with Hugh Jackson's quarterback whispering skills, he'll become a franchise quarterback, which is a phrase that I absolutely despise. It doesn't mean anything. And they talked themselves into it based on 2 good games in the preseason. The first game against the third string, and then the second game against the second string. In the third game that they played, it was against the first string of the opposition, and Kaiser went 6 for 18, and he passed for under 100 yards and really had a bad game. And they said, well, okay, you're still a franchise quarterback. We're going to hold you out of the fourth game because we think that you're all already tuned up for the NFL. I'm not making this up. That's how dumb the Browns were in 2017. And DeShone Kizer led the Browns to an 0-16 season that year. And somehow they managed to not fire Hugh Jackson. They did fire the general manager, Sashi Brown, although I think his basic plan was sound. He overdid it by trading away all the veteran quarterbacks. That was a mistake. They could have won at least one game by keeping a veteran quarterback in town, but they didn't. They also managed to trade Joe Hayden, who was a very capable Pro Bowl level cornerback, and that was not a good football move. They wound up having to absorb $11 million of salary cap charges to have him go play football for the Pittsburgh Steelers. That was not a viable football decision, I'm here to tell you. And when you make moves like that, that gets you fired. All right. Anyway, so I'm not saying that the New York Jets are necessarily worse than the Cleveland Browns at their worst, but the Jets are doing now what the Browns used to do when we deserved every bit of criticism that we received. The Jets do stupid things like invest the second overall draft pick in a guy like Zach Wilson, who played in the COVID era and played pretty well for Brigham Young University, had some very nice seasons. I think was an impressive quarterback prospect. But like the Browns, they couldn't wait to put him in the lineup. He was a raw rookie, and they stuck him in the lineup immediately. He's the quarterback of the present, and even though they had massive injuries on the offensive line and they couldn't protect him, they stuck him out there, and, well, you're just going to have to learn, kid. And he got completely demolished. They did their best to absolutely ruin him. And, well, that's basically what they did. They had no offense at all, and he was not able to function well as a quarterback, and the results have been disastrous. Now, he did actually win some games. He got better as the season went by, but not enough to satisfy the insatiable New York media. And in that respect, I think his job is even more difficult than the jobs of, let's say, Johnny Manziel or DeShone Kizer, those great franchise quarterbacks of Cleveland's past, sort of like the ghost of Christmas past. The pressure in New York is even worse, 10 times worse than in Cleveland, and it's impossible to satisfy the media. The coach just has to do the right thing and absorb the blame. I don't know if Robert Saleh is up to that job, the coach. In fact, I'll do some sharing now of some PowerPoints. Saleh, I think, was a really excellent defensive coordinator for San Francisco. And, okay, give me just a second here. Let me stall for time because I'm always fumbling with the PowerPoint. Here we go. And there it is. Okay, Saleh, when he played, or coached, I should say, for San Francisco, was a really scary defensive coordinator. He just really was an undisputed leader of the defense, was a really stern guy, very highly respected around the league. I don't think anybody said anything bad about Robert Saleh. His unit was very highly disciplined, very effective in all phases of defense, and I just really think everybody around the NFL respected him. He really had a high reputation as a defensive coordinator. And he had the respect of his players and fellow coaches alike. And he was a commanding presence on the sidelines, just a very confident, charismatic leader on the sidelines. But I think now in New York, he's just sort of lost that. He looks like he's worried and lost on the sidelines. A lot of people say that his body language is terrible. I'm one of those who criticize him. He looks worried. He looks timid, scared on the sideline. It's just awful. And he's just not the same person that he was when he was the defensive coordinator, in my opinion. A lot of it has to do, I think, with troubles on the offense where he really doesn't have the power, perhaps, to do what he wants to. A lot of it has to do with the pressure that's been placed upon him by these so-called franchise quarterbacks that he's been given and more or less forced to try to succeed with. First, it's Zach Wilson, and this year it's been everything was placed on Aaron Rodgers, much like the Cleveland Browns have been asked to succeed with Deshaun Watson. It was an all or nothing proposition, and Aaron Rodgers had the greatest off-season and preseason of any quarterbacks in history. Really turned around the attitude of the offense, had the press eating out of his hands, and raised the level of expectations just by being in camp and by refocusing the team, had the press eating out of his hand. It really was just absolutely tremendous as an ambassador for the team. Then he got injured after just a few plays in the regular season, and that was that. I never really bought into Aaron Rodgers completely because I think he's 39 years old and not everybody can last as long as Tom Brady did. Just because Aaron Rodgers played at the same level as Tom Brady does not mean that he can play as long as Tom Brady did or as well. So I've been a skeptic. I was at the beginning of the season. I had statistics, that showed, I thought, that he was slowing down. It's not that Aaron Rodgers was a running quarterback, but if you look at his ability to run, it suggested to me that he was losing his mobility, and that was a proxy. In other words, a proxy is a quantity that you measure that is not the thing that you're really trying to look for in terms of production, but that it is related to that. And you saw that his body is slowing down, and eventually it was going to, I believe, transfer to lower production from his arm. Okay, first the legs go, in other words, and then later it's going to be the arm. That's what I felt was happening to him. And then here's the comparison about the Jets and the Cleveland Browns of 5 or 6 years ago. It's maybe longer than that if you include Johnny Manziel. These are science fiction narratives that make absolutely no sense. That are based upon this notion that there's this revolutionary, transcendent franchise quarterback. It was Johnny Manziel in 2013, 2014. DeShone Kizer in 2017. Zach Wilson and now Aaron Rodgers are also being placed in that same position, and they're expected to completely transform the offense of the team. But I think, like the Browns, the Jets have some terrible problems on offense. Namely, they don't have a stable offensive lineman. I don't see how they're going to get the job done. Who's going to protect Aaron Rodgers if they can't protect Zach Wilson, who's young and very fast, very mobile? I don't see how they're going to protect Aaron Rodgers unless they get some new offensive linemen very quickly in the off season. This doesn't make any sense to me. But anyway, I'm pointing out what I've already told you, that DeShone Kizer was drafted in the second round. Kizer had some impressive games against backups in preseason. Backups in preseason mean absolutely nothing for the regular season. And as the preseason games got a little bit more meaningful and he started against the first string preseason, which even that is not really that significant, but he struggled against the first string against Tampa Bay, and it got worse from there. The greatest audacity was holding him out of the fourth preseason game, figuring that, okay, he knows everything he needs to in order to play quarterback in the NFL. Let's just rest him. That was nuts. All right. See, before I talk about Zach Wilson, let's take a break here. We need to have some, we need to do a few commercials in order to keep our organization floating. We're very grateful for the support from our fans. Thank you very much. If you want to subscribe to us on our various platforms, it really helps us a lot, so please do that. And thank you also for our sponsors for buying commercial airtime. And we're just really grateful for all the support we've been getting from top to bottom. Thank you very much, and we'll be back in just a few minutes. Okay, and we're back. Zach Wilson, I think, was just way overrated by the draft. The entire community, it seems, talked themselves into believing that Zach was a generational talent based on some admittedly very nice success at Brigham Young, a Big 12 school. So it does count as major college football, although I would argue the Big 12 was kind of an off it was sort of an off period due to COVID, and the Big 12 wasn't really that functional as a football power during those years. But nevertheless, he performed very well. He got to play the games that are out there, and he did. And he didn't get immediate success. They should never have thought that he was going to play great from the get-go. He should have been on the bench his first year, but they can't do that with first-round draft picks. They think that first-round draft picks have got to play well immediately, but that just was not him. I think that if you had left him alone, let him, sit back and watch somebody like Mike White, like Joe Flacco play for a few games, then he might have done a lot better. But that's just not the way that the New York Jets think. They think that the young quarterback has to play now. We need him now. And that just makes me want to hurl, frankly. And then in 2023, they go and sign Aaron Rodgers. They don't decide to get three of the best quarterbacks they can find. Instead, they decide that what they need to do is to have Zach Wilson, who by this time, by the way, they're kind of disenchanted with. And they think, well, man, we know that he's not ready to play quarterback in the NFL, but we're going to get rid of two guys that are ready to play quarterback in the NFL. We're going to get rid of Mike White, and we're going to get rid of Joe Flacco. And the reason is that we want to avoid hurting Zach Wilson's feelings. We don't want to have any competition for the second string job. So we want Zach to feel that he is the quarterback of the future and not have competition. I think that's totally a mistake. I think you should always have three quarterbacks on the 53-player roster. I think you should have a fourth quarterback that's a practice squad dude that maybe is not really fantastic, but you need to have somebody there for an emergency. Somebody like, P.J. Walker, who can play quarterback, do a credible job, maybe not somebody that's a candidate for the Hall of Fame, but just somebody who can play and learn the playbook. There's a big difference between a guy of average ability who knows the playbook versus somebody of average ability who does not know the playbook. Nevertheless, Jets don't do that. So there we are. Didn't have anybody when they needed to fill the void when Aaron Rodgers went down unexpectedly in game one. No Mike White, no Flacco. Didn't want to go back to it. Let's throw Zach back in there. Okay, these things I don't want to. Yeah, I'm ready to go back. Okay. And so we're back to live. That's just the way that the New York, the way the team thinks, the way the media thinks, the way the fan base thinks. They just place so much responsibility on the quarterback to completely solve the problems of the offense. They don't know what an offensive lineman is. You know, they did draft Mekhi Becton, I believe high in the first round a few years ago. I'm not sure that they did their homework on him. He's been, he's had trouble staying healthy, and they've questioned his work ethic at times. He's sort of like Zach Wilson, except he's an offensive lineman. But he's really big, and yet he's had trouble staying healthy. So they need to get some guys that are actual offensive linemen that can stay healthy and that can play and protect the quarterbacks that they do have. They need to have quarterbacks that are maybe not necessarily franchise quarterbacks, but guys that can actually play. Mike White was actually a perfect guy for what they needed. Here's a guy that can play quarterback and that can throw 300-yard games if called upon. Maybe he's not the guy that's going to start and make all pro, but he can play. He can win football games. He can help your team compete. And meanwhile, Robert Saleh has done a really good job with their defense. They can be in every game if they will only get a quarterback that doesn't screw things up. They could win, but instead they get quarterback plays that results in a lot of mistakes and turnovers, and they wind up actually losing games on offense that could have been won by the defense. That's something like the Browns of 2017 were famous for. So, I don't know. That's just their mentality. Something else that really bugged me was a few years ago. I won't mention the sportscaster's name, but this is when I think Zach was a rookie, and the sports media thought, oh, you know, it would be really great if we got Zach another wide receiver. Hey, well, why don't we go get T. Higgins from the Cincinnati Bengals? Yeah, let's just go trade for him. They don't need T. Higgins in Cincinnati. And so why don't the Cincinnati Bengals need T. Higgins? That was the most stupid thing ever that was in the national media. And it turned out that the Cincinnati Bengals wound up going to the Super Bowl that year. T. Higgins, of course, was a very good wide receiver and did a lot of good for that team. And he was teamed with Joe freaking Burrow, who was a first overall draft pick. And I think he did pretty well for himself. Thank you very much. And he was just a little bit better than your guy in New York, Zach Wilson. Zach Wilson did not take advantage of a guy like T. Higgins. Just because you're from New York City doesn't mean that you need wide receivers from the Midwest and that you can just go take what you want just because you're from New York, and us guys in Ohio don't need extra players, that we're just a farm system for New York. That makes me mad. I'm not really, I'm a Browns reporter. I'm not really here to defend the Cincinnati Bengals, but the mentality that New York teams can just take players from other teams because you think that your guy is so important, and our teams in the Midwest, like I'm talking Pittsburgh, I'm talking Cincinnati, and of course I'm talking the Cleveland Browns, that these teams just don't count, and your New York Jets are so important. That makes me mad. And I don't know what's the matter with you guys in the national media that you think that that's a reasonable thing to do or to ask is that Midwest teams should give away players to the New York Jets just because Zach Wilson needs to have an extra receiver. That is really stupid. Thank you very much. Have a nice day, everybody. We'll talk again tomorrow. Bye.